This is going to be an interesting show. Definitely share the link. Tell your friends. Let's get everyone to get in here. Let's give everyone a chance to see it. We're going to have a compelling discussion here tonight. Folks, we know that many of you, your family is public servant. You may be a public servant. You may have friends who are public servants. Get them in here tonight, folks. Send the link. Share the link to them. Let them take a look at the show as we discuss these salary hikes, the salary hike that has been announced. Give you some perspective as to what were some of the hikes that existed under the coalition, whether or not this hike is in any way reasonable, and what can be expected in the future from a coalition government. So folks, share the link, let's give everyone a chance, let's bring everyone in. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Lowdown. I'm your host, Elson Low. So we're going to cover the salary hikes, this new salary hike from many different angles. We're going to talk about it in the context of the cost of living struggles that Guyanese are going through right now. We're going to talk about it in the context of the largest budget by far in the country's history. And I give you some perspective on that. We're going to talk about it in the context of a very high oil price, which has caused the country to grow more quickly than expected, and for us to have actually quite a windfall of additional oil revenue this year. So we're going to look at this from many different angles, folks, in addition to giving you an idea of what existed before and what you can expect in the future. Folks, we've even got a short clip from the current president, before he was president, talking about what they would, the PPP would do in terms of salary hikes, which doesn't seem to have been what we're observing at all now, folks. Not at all what we're seeing now. So we're going to have a show that really covers this issue from a wide range of angles, because we know that it is bread and butter. It is vital for so many Guyanese people's lives. So we're going to talk quite a bit about this and give you an insight. But more than that, we want you to have a sense of what it is that you really should be getting, so that you can feel energized to go and press for what it is that you deserve. So folks, we're going to talk quite a bit about the public servant salary increase levels tonight. Actually, I've got a guest here with me tonight that some of you may recognize, bringing the band back together. So that's Randolph Critchlow from Afternoon Rush. If you guys can recall, we used to be quite often on the same show discussing economic matters, discussing those economic matters. So we've got Randolph Critchlow here tonight to talk about this. There you go. There's Randolph. So I'm sure he's excited to be on the show. Randolph, good to have you on the show.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to your viewers this evening for tuning in. I can't say that I'm excited to talk about this. Quite a depressing period for the public servants, but we have to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's a vital issue. It is an issue of national importance, and really it raises a question that I think many Guyanese have had at the back of their mind. Recall, this is the first oil budget. And in the first oil budget, people are wondering, are we going to see any changes in the way that the government operates? Yeah. And so far the answer is no. But we're going to get into that in a second, folks. Share the link, folks. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. Let's give everyone a chance to be a part of the discussion. And as we kick it off, let's take a look at the first slide that we've got as we kind of get the conversation going. So operator, we could get that first slide. There we go. Everyone remembers this, the famous 50% increase for public servants.
Are you sure it's not Photoshop?
I'm telling you, the amount of people that have remarked to me that they saw it for themselves.
Yes.
And yet the government continues to say that it was Photoshop.
Yeah.
Very, very hilarious. But anyway, so there we've got that 50% increase for public servants promised, the PUP promised. Guyanese, that promise is looking shaky. We are already 3 years in. What have we seen? 0, I think, was the first year.
Yeah.
Then 7%. Then 8%.
So we're up to 15. They have
not looking good.
2.5 years to go. You have 2.5 years.
Not looking good. That will put you only at what, 30% or so. But anyway, I think also what people had thought is that it would be 50% in 1 year.
Yeah. They didn't specify. They said this is the issue with campaigning. You know, you're campaigning and you're giving all these fancy numbers that you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and so it is incumbent on the people to hold you to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, voters, you got to keep this in the back of your mind. Is the government doing anything near what they promised? That's the first thing. And the second thing is expectations have to adjust as the country grows, as we see change. And given that Guyana expanded by 60% this year, 50% seems to me to be a little short of the mark.
You said something there. I know we'll get into the conversation. But you said something there that is very instructive. That expectations can't be deceived. If you are the first government to spend oil money, you have to be held to a different standard.
Exactly. So.
The expectations are obviously higher.
Exactly.
And so you can't come back with the same old 5%, 8%, 7%.
Like nothing happened. Like we never found oil.
Right. We didn't find oil. Plus, like we never had 3 years of suffering from brought on by COVID and all manner of things, cost of living. So it is kind of incongruent. I can't understand how the APNU ALC could have given these significant increases without oil money.
Yeah. Well, let's lean into that a little bit because that's one of the questions. So we recall the APNU AFC gave a couple of significant increases and it added up to quite a bit. Was it?
The minimum wage would have added up to 77%.
Yes, so those are the lower end of the income bracket.
Right.
Would have seen a 77% increase before we even produced a drop of oil. We saw that. Viewers, that is really an achievement. And this government, while having oil, is nowhere near approaching anything like that, which is, I think, a tragedy, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. And, you know, I want to put things in context. I know you are the numbers guy, but I want to break it down for the people. The APNU AFC in 3 years, because we remember after December 2018, the government was basically, you know, their hands were tied a bit in terms of doing budgetary things. So within 3 years, you would have seen this increase, this massive increase. The same time period for this government, you have seen 0, 7, and 8. And so the comparison is not really a comparison.
No comparison at all.
Without oil money in 3 years, you would have seen 77% increase in minimum wage. Those same workers under the PPP with oil money and with harder financial times have gotten
high inflation,
nothing really.
And so on. Yes, and then when you put that in the context of the fact that we were able to push out a 26% increase, and you know the focus really is on those at the lower end of the income scale here. That is a massive increase to be able to do that without oil. That's the thing. Now that we've got oil and we've got the first oil budget in the country's history, the budget, I mean, it's 44% bigger, viewers, 44% bigger than it was last year. And of course, we'll now talk a bit about the actual increase the government has mentioned, which is only 8%. So you've got a 44% bigger budget. You've got a country growing at nearly 60% in 1 year. And yet your increase is a tiny, measly, minimal 8% increase. It doesn't match up with what's going on in the country and reflects that the government doesn't really have an interest in public servants.
I am convinced that one of the two things are happening. Either they are totally out of touch with the masses and the actual struggles of the average man, or they really don't care. I believe, like I was saying earlier, that earlier today I was having a conversation with someone, and I said that I believe that the PPP are banking on this as a win-win for them. It might sound like a strange take, but I believe that the infrastructure development that they will focus on, that will do two things. One, the big monies are going to go to their friends, families, and cronies. Those are the people who are going to get the big contracts. Those are the people that are going to take the hog of the billions, the tune of billions of dollars in these infrastructure development.
Yes, absolutely.
And they are banking on the fact that, look, we can do these infrastructure development, get the monies in our friends' pocket, and come election time, we can point to those infrastructure developments and look, we do this, we did that. What we need to understand is that with this oil money, with increased budget, like you mentioned, 44% bigger than the last one.
Yeah, big.
These are normal courses of development with increased budget, with increased monies available. It is only natural that more infrastructure work will be done. So, but they are saying, look, this is what they're banking on. We don't need to funnel all this money into the public servant, to the average man. We can try this top-down thing, this trickle-down thing. Let's put all the money to the people, give all the money to the people who own and control the means of production, and let them figure out how to get the money to the masses. And for me, this is their plan. I know there are efforts on their part to make it not seem like that. But the reality is, when you look at the policies, when you look at where they're spending their money, it is obvious that they are banking on, come elections, we can point these, say, look, we did this road, we did that bridge, look, we put up that hotel.
Yeah.
Y'all leave us in power. But don't worry about your salary.
One of the funny things, though, is that even when they do a road, man, it's 2 days later the road got a problem. 2 weeks later the road got a big hole. I mean,
because it's his friends, families, and favorites doing it. They ain't looking to do any quality.
I mean, unbelievable. I think one road was actually 2 days after the road was completed. I always recall, I think it's the road, the UG road.
Yeah.
That only 2 days later there was an issue with that.
Big hole.
Is beyond belief. I've never heard of that in any country in the world. Yeah. You know, but you know, Guyana is a special place when it comes to things like that.
I before we come off of this issue, I know how I see this is that the people of Guyana, the public servants, the teachers and nurses and the civil servants, they have received their cash grant. That is what this is. Because that retroactive salary from January to December, you'll come and they can tax it, and people can carry them a nice 80 or 120 or something. And January morning, as we say in Guyana, January morning, your spending power has gone up 8%.
Tiny.
Right? 8%. Those of you who are getting the minimum wage and just what is the taxable amount?
The tax threshold.
Tax threshold is 80,000.
Yeah, I believe it's 75.
75. Those people, so when you add your 8% to that, and they just go over the 75, you can tax the amount over the 75, so you really benefiting anything from that. Well, so January morning, you back to basically starvation wages.
Well, the thing about it is, and this is why we've really got to continue to help people to understand what's going on. The inflation rate, the rate of the increase in the cost of living, all these prices going up, is expected to be around 8, maybe 10% by the end of the year. Now, if you give people 8% raise and the inflation, it means that you haven't increased people's money at all. It's just matching what exists there. And they tried to pull that same trick last year where the raise was almost the same as the inflation rate. I think when you took out for tax, it was exactly the same as the inflation rate. So that's the type of nonsense that you're seeing. And on the flip side of that, because viewers, we have to keep reminding you, this is an oil and gas, partially oil and gas economy. We got to understand oil the way that we understood sugar, understood rice, understood bauxite. And just as much as we've been facing high cost of living because of the high oil price, transportation costs for food, the country has benefited in terms of having a massive increase in revenues to the order of $60 billion of excess revenue. We didn't even expect that was generated. And so in the midst of us getting in all this extra revenue, in the midst of people punished from the cost of living crisis, the government is basically saying, well, we're not going to give anything to anybody.
But that is the kind of talk that the government doesn't want to hear. And they have done their level best to try and mitigate the expectations of the people. I recall the Minister of Finance only a few days ago in an article saying that the oil funds are not sufficient for forward development. And this is coming from a government that touted Guyana as the Dubai of the Caribbean and X amount of development, this bank coming in, we're getting this and that. We've seen the English now, the British coming in with lots of development, work and investment.
Visa-free travel.
Right? Visa-free travel. And all of these, just a bit of an aside, people need to put the dots together. You see the British being very involved, and it's the same British that said that the list is good. The list of electors is good.
Well,
good.
that is something for people to ponder.
Right? So you see a lot of, a surge of British investment and bilateral agreements. And at the same time, the British just conveniently, the British High Commission says, oh, the list of electors is okay.
All of those are questions to be asked. Now, one of the things that really peeves me when I hear folks say, oh, the revenue is not enough for development. Let's throw our minds back a few short years. When we were looking to have Amalia first built, that was a few $100 million. Looking to get Skeldon built, that's a few $100 million. Folks, in only 3 months of this year, the amount of revenue being generated, every 3 months you could have gotten an Amalia and a Skeldon. Every 3 months. This country in the third quarter generated, I think, 491 or 493 million US in 3 months, which is roughly $500,000 per household that was generated. You could easily have built a Skeldon from that. And that was at the time the country's biggest infrastructure project and so on. And so the question you have to ask is, if we're generating enough money to actually produce this type of pay for these types of infrastructure developments, how is it that you can come and say, oh, the money is not enough, we can't, and so on? And then, on top of that, viewers, again, we got to understand, in only a couple months, what's going to happen? Another ship is going to start producing oil, and that one ship is going to produce as much oil as the whole of Trinidad nearly at the peak.
At their peak.
And that's one of several ships. Folks, what we believe really is going on at PVP is the PVP intends to pretend like there's no oil money, give you the same increases they would have given you if you didn't have oil money, and then find ways to steal that money for their friends, family,
and funnel it into the direction that they want it to. It is quite instructive, people, that the Minister of Finance, on the heels of an announcement in increase in public servant salary, that he would say something like that.
Exactly.
You have to put the pieces together. They were almost telegraphing the fact that, we are not going to be giving the average man. And it cements, I know the leader of the opposition said in his statement that they're an anti-poor and anti-working class.
Exactly.
They are only concerned with propping up the people at the top and funneling the monies there, because how can you face the people? In Guyanese parlance, there's a saying, cockroach eat out your conscience. It is unconscionable for the PPP government, this installed government, to face the Guyanese people after 3 years of hardship.
Exactly.
And say to the people who are taking home $100,000 a month, hold this $8,000 extra.
Telling you.
To the people who carry home $80,000 just above minimum wage, hold this $6,400.
And what makes it really awful is that, so folks, it's an 8% across the board.
Oh, geez. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down for the people. Across the board.
Because that's the thing that people sometimes, that when you have a flat increase like that and you don't adjust it so that those at the top are getting a less of an increase and those at the bottom getting more of an increase, what happens is you see people who are on the minimum wage getting a $72,000, whereas those who are on the high end with the $900,000 salaries and so on, they're getting over $800,000
extra.
Over 800, they're getting 12 times as much as the people at the bottom.
Listen, across the board increases are evil. It's dastardly.
I mean, goodness.
It is unbelievably shameful because, as the economics person here, tell me if I'm going in the right direction. Now, the government has a particular sum of money that will go to increases in wages and salaries. And that's a set amount of money. So the government is ensured that, listen, we have the amount of money that we need to increase these wages and salaries. As the government, you decide how you will distribute these increases. Same money, different method.
Of course.
Now, if you use the method that the PVP is using, then we just chop up the money, right? And we have a scale like this, lowest to the highest. More of the money goes to the people in the highest bracket because they have more money. It's 10% of $1 million is a lot more than 10% of 100,000.
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing the president drawing from this. I think it's close to $2 million or something that he's going to get from this. Whereas the person at the bottom is getting $72,000.
Right. Oh, this when you talk about the retro.
Yeah, when you add it up, that's the total. And that to me is one of the things that and this is what we mentioned today, you don't hear people talking about. I've never really come across a government that doesn't talk about poverty at all and doesn't talk about inequality at all. And these folks pretend like these two words don't exist.
No, this is a utopia we live in.
You know?
We are living in a utopia. Those things don't exist.
They're putting their head straight past all the people who are struggling in this country and obviously need help. And they're pretending like nothing is going on. And you can understand that they don't talk about inequality if they're going to give the ones at the top 800,000.
Yeah, the same 10% like the people at the bottom.
Yeah,
and you know, it's just like it's just this mentality. Look, you have this set amount of money to spend. How are we going to divide it? So a small amount will go to the people at the bottom, a large amount, and it goes up like that. Now, what we are saying and what we have practiced in the past is a staggered thing, where more of the money goes to the people who are earning less. Because we have a set, as I said, we have a set of money there for increases. And so if we give 10% to the people who are earning $100,000, right? There's a $10,000 increase on your salary. And if we give 2% to the people earning $800,000 and more.
Yeah, it might work out to be around.
Right. So you have equity.
Exactly.
And so if I give you $8,000 increase on your salary, you can't really go to the market and buy anything with that.
Yeah, well, when the 8,000 is roughly the same as the increase in the prices in the market, you realize this is a big joke.
The man earning 500,000 gets 40,000 increase.
Yeah.
Now that extra 40,000 is something significant.
Very significant. Now, one of the things we also want viewers to understand, which makes this, and you use the word evil, which I find
it is evil.
So here's another tidbit for you viewers. Do you know that the people on the lower end of the income scale spend a greater share of the income on food?
Yes.
They spend on food, right? Because ultimately they don't have a lot of extra money to be spending on all sorts of luxuries, right? So they spend on food. Now, food inflation in Guyana has been one of the main areas of inflation, and between last year Christmas and this Christmas is about 25%, because of course you had the flood, of course internationally you've had inflation, but also the government hasn't really done enough to combat food inflation in this country. So you mean to tell me that the folks who are suffering the most on the lower end are getting the smallest amount of money in the hand, and at the same time are suffering the most from the high cost of living? When you use the word evil, it's a very interesting word to use.
Across the board increases
that
evil.
Is a terrible idea.
It is just, it speaks to the uncaring nature of the government. It speaks to the fact that the government really don't care about the average man. They cannot claim to be the government of the working class. It is obvious to every single right-thinking Guyanese that this installed PPP government is concerned about filling the pockets of the people at the top.
Exactly.
And you, as an economist, can attest to the fact that trickle-down economics is evil to the masses.
Well, it has proved controversial for many years, but it's one of those things. It's coming and coming. And the point of it that we try to tell people to understand is you have to really adapt your system to the demands and the challenges of the economy. It seems to me that the DP is running the economy as if they think we just happen to get some more forestry money or some more gold money, and has not come to terms yet with the fact that this is oil money. It's an economy that is now going to be dominated by oil, and that has specific challenges that come from that. They have no appreciation of that, and as a result, they have their policies and plans don't even approach this issue. And so it is normal in an oil and gas economy that you see huge amounts of inequality, and you have to try now and address that through deliberate policies. If you pretend that nothing is going on, what's going to happen is exactly what we're seeing, where the ones at the top are getting huge amounts of money, $1 million, 800,000, 2 million, and the people at the bottom are getting nothing. Yeah. And the other thing that is we need to be aware of, which is very important, is assets like house prices, like stocks and so on, have gone through the roof. So the wealthiest are 5 times as wealthy as they were only a few years ago. And then on top of that, why don't you take $1 million here? Why don't you take $1 million? Meanwhile, those on the low end who may not have a house yet, who certainly don't have any stock, I don't know how many people on the low end have stock, right? They now are not getting any money in their hands. So the gap between rich and poor is getting to be very big. And that is why we have said that we're going to deliberately deal with the poverty situation in the country. And we're going to put in place plans which are deliberate to actually address this. Now, from that perspective, we can talk a bit about the people-centered vision and talk a bit about public servants specifically, because we do not believe that this is the way to do it, and we have a different way that we would approach this. First of all, I think it's pretty clear to viewers so far, we're not going to be giving you increases that just barely manage to hold up to the inflation rate. Yeah. That is not acceptable. It is not acceptable when the country is growing at 60%. It is not acceptable when the budget is growing at 44%. That shows that public servants are not a priority. In fact, they're probably one of the last priorities of the government if you grow in spending in all of these other areas. Yeah. You know? So we are going to ensure the public servants have substantial increases. That's the first thing. The second thing is we want everyone, and this is an interesting point that we could talk about, the working poor. Yeah. You're working, you're putting out all your time and energy, but you're punishing. That, to me, feels like what it is like for most Guyanese right now. You're punishing. You're punishing.
Yeah. And this sense that the government wants to portray that we are living in this utopia speaks, and coming directly off of what you said, this idea of the working poor. Now, I'm thinking about the sweeper cleaner at a school. Yeah, yeah. Earning minimum wage. Thinking about whether or not she will be able to ever afford her own home in this country.
Exactly.
And she hears that the government is offering house lots. Come to the stadium with $800,000. Where's she finding that?
Where is she finding $800,000 from?
Right. Where's she finding that? So, and I'm telling you this hypothetical story, but I'm using actual pieces of things that people told me.
Yes, exactly.
The guy stopped me the other day and he said, they called him and said, listen, if you come to the stadium with $500,000, you'll get this. He said he is a delivery guy. He rides a little motorcycle and he goes about. Yeah. So he scrambled up 300,000. Right? He got fined 450. So he went up. People say, we can't come back next week. The man said he spent a week going around. Yeah. Searching. He found other 150 and he went to them. They said, come back. Come up to now. Yeah. He's yet to get that piece of land now. Exactly. This is an average poor man on the ground. Yeah. Yeah. You're telling him. Now, let's go back to the public servant, the super cleaner at a school. Right? I even need to go to the super cleaner, a teacher. That they promised 50% increase. Now, that teacher, she scrambles to find $800,000. Let's just say that she begged and she borrowed.
Yeah, saved for several years.
Right, and she got this 800, and she went up to the stadium and she got this piece of land. What she would have done there is knock his stomach in Guyanese parlance. And she probably now got to pay back them people who she borrowed this money from for the next couple of years. That land is left there, nothing is on it. Yeah. Where she knocking his stomach by and so that teacher is looking forward. Now, she had to deal with COVID. She had to deal with all of the rising food prices, cost of living, inflation. And she's now looking at the television to see what this caring government is going to help her out with, so that she has a little more spending power and maybe save enough money to put something on this land. Let's just say that she got the land. If they were lucky enough to find the 800,000. And she looks at this 8% and she must be feeling despair. Like, why am I even trying in this country?
Well, that's the thing, the 8%, because the high cost of living is the same as nothing. Yes. So basically what is happening is that you're not making any progress when it comes to these things. Someone even remarked to me, You know, a young lady remarked to me, you know how long it takes me to save 100,000?
Of course.
You know how long it takes?
People are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. It is incredibly difficult for people out there. And it is in a time of great bounty where we've made an additional 60 billion we didn't even expect to make.
That's the pincher, that's the kicker. That people are out there looking, they open the papers every day. Another oil fine.
Yes.
Another oil.
Exactly.
You know, it's like DJ Khalid. Another one.
I'm telling you, and the thing about it is, that works up to 300,000 per household. 300,000 per household. That money could easily be put towards dealing with the cost of living crisis. We believe that it should go to families across the country. We should find a fair way to distribute it, and that it should be given to across the country to people. Of course, you can break it over a period of time to deal with any inflation issues, but it needs to find its way to the people. There is no reason that in a time of plenty, Guyana is doing well, Guyanese should be suffering. That means the opposite of what is supposed to happen. But you raise a point there as it concerns teachers. Now, some areas they've mentioned there will be a further adjustment to the salary scale, so waiting on that. But it didn't mention teachers. And I thought to myself, my word, that is absolutely vicious. How could you ignore? I mean, teachers is one of the most critical elements of the public service. So to ignore that is truly awful. Now, one of the things we've mentioned before on the show that some viewers may recall is that when you look at it, about 80% of Guyanese don't have math and English. About 80% of Guyanese don't have that. Yes. Well, when you have a pass rate of 3 or 4% for math, over a period of time, that's what's going to happen. And so as a result of that, we have talked about how important teachers are going to be going forward to help the country to retool, to fix the mistakes of the past, when we didn't have revenue, but also we had incompetence on the PUP, and to move the country in the right direction so that everyone can access high-paying jobs, office jobs, if they should choose to do so. Now, some people may not want to go that route. That's fine. But we want people to have access. It's all about having access, all about giving you the opportunity to live your best life, to be the best version of yourself. And that's why we're talking about student stipends. You're studying, you'll get a stipend, whether it's to go back and do your maths in English or so on. But for public servants, you can also get a stipend if you want to further your studies. If you're a teacher and you want to take some courses to improve your teaching abilities, your skills, whether you want to go on to do a master's or something, you can get a stipend while you're doing that to help you with the expenses that are associated with studying and so on.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason that we propose these things, we bring these things forward is, one, we understand there's a desperate need because of the neglect of all of these years. But also, we believe that we should be supporting people in accomplishing their dreams.
Yeah.
You know, that's what being people-centered is all about.
Yeah. Talking about that, let me, on a rare occasion, point out two positive things. I just saw an article that said that CPC teachers, trainees will receive salaries from next year.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Right. So kudos. You see, at some point in time, you can't leave Jack to think. You gotta give each Jack it sometimes. So kudos. I'm happy as a teacher. I'm happy to see that happening. Now, another piece of, and I'm coming here to what you said just now. Another piece of thing that I will, give a small kudos to the government. I think that there is value. Right. There is value in the gold scholarship, and I encourage people from all walks of life to apply for those gold scholarships. It is your government money that is eventually going to pay for it.
There you go.
So apply, take advantage of the gold scholarships that are being offered. Now, there are some issues in terms of how it has been implemented and the bypassing of the University of Guyana.
I also thought it was strange that the gold scholarships didn't focus on oil and gas.
Oil and gas, too. So there's issues with it. But there's some value in encouraging
well, we're never
people.
going to say that people shouldn't take advantage of scholarships and further themselves. What we will say is that we understand that studying has its own expenses, whether it is the internet, whether it is your transportation, whether it is having to buy a device or a computer or something to be able to study, whether it is books. There are lots of expenses that are connected to studying. So we want people to get a stipend to help them through that process as they study. So that is an area that we want to focus on. But I'll tell you a funny thing. Do you know that the share of the budget that goes towards gold scholarships has actually fallen from last year to this year?
Well,
the spend on education, the share of the budget spent on education has fallen from like 16% to 13% this year. And this is the first oil budget.
Crazy.
Folks,
where you look at where the people spending their money. but let me continue on the point on that we're talking about. So it's good to see that the CPC teachers trainee teachers will get a salary. Good to see that the gold scholarship, and we encourage people to take advantage of the gold scholarship. But there is a problem. I was in RDC meeting last month or month before last, and the RHO, the regional health officer, was appealing to counselors. If you know nurses, retired nurses, encourage them to come back in the profession. They're facing a crisis in the Ministry of Health. In that England and the US and a lot of these countries, these are appealing destinations for nurses.
Of course.
And it's not easy. The process, it's not easy. I was told that it's up to $3 million they have to find. But such is the state in Guyana that people are willing to find that $3 million, and instead of go build a house, take it and invest in their trip to England, because there are a lot of things that you have to do and you have to pay, because it's a long process. But they are willing. They're seeing
they see it as an investment.
And they will get back at it. So nurses are going out in droves. So the government, instead of saying, "Oh, how are we going to solve this issue?" Maybe we should increase the salary.
Exactly. Long now.
They are encouraging retired nurses to come back. Similarly, teachers are leaving. I recently saw an article for applications for teachers to teach in the United States. And so we are facing a brain drain crisis and a crisis of exit of skilled workers, because we are not focusing on moving them from starvation wages to living wages.
Exactly.
And so this brings it back to what we are saying. I know that the leader of the opposition said, look, minimum wages should be at least 150,000. What have they done? They have basically moved minimum wage up by...
They moved it by a little bit, but nothing much. And what we want people to understand is, so the minimum wage has increased this year, and we had to abuse to get them to increase that in the first place. That's the first thing. Last thing I remember saying at a press conference is that Guyanese are disgusted by the fact that they're not raising this minimum wage, especially in the circumstances. But that's from 2017 to now. You've had a 36% increase in minimum wage. But the stock market, right? So the wealthy people, their assets has gone up by 400%. And so that's where you're seeing this huge gap between the rich and the poor. And that, to me, is something that unless we are deliberate in ensuring that we watch these things and ensuring that everyone is benefiting, that's exactly what's going to happen. You know, the oil and gas economy has its own challenges, and we must address those challenges head on, rather than pretending that they do not exist, which just seems to me is the government's go-to strategy. Just hope that the problem will go away. So,
as viewers will remember, the leader of the opposition brought a motion to the parliament to discuss the cost of living. Right? And you know, it seems as though anything that would cast the government in a bad light is shut down by the speaker. Wanted to discuss the flooding. We wanted to discuss cost of living. We wanted to discuss the list. And so these are things that affect the people out there and the opposition, because people like to see. What the opposition doing? What the opposition doing? The opposition has been fighting every single day. If you're tuned to the press conferences, I'm sure you would have seen Elson. You would have seen the leader of the opposition calling for these increases. You would have seen the parliamentarians in parliament bringing motions in parliament.
But they should, The speaker doesn't want to let any of those motions be heard.
So your cost of living is not something the speaker thinks should be discussed in Parliament.
I think the terming is that it was not urgent.
Yeah, so it's not. You can't afford food in your pot, but it's not urgent for the speaker because those people are sitting in there. The minister's carrying home $800,000, $900,000 a month. So it's not urgent for them, of course.
Not urgent for them at all. Not urgent for them at all.
Of course.
And this Christmas, they get an extra sweet Christmas because on top of that, 900,000. They're getting another 900,000. Boom.
Because what's 8% of
yeah, 8% of that 900,000 is going to be 864,000, I think, when you add it up. Wow. So they should be carrying home, let me say, 850 or so.
They're getting an extra $800,000.
Folks, wouldn't you love to be carrying home at 850? But that is not what is going on, sad to say. It's not what's going on in a country that has the second most barrels of oil per person of any country in the world. More barrels of oil per person than Saudi Arabia. Believe that. So the Saudis are out there, driving the Maseratis, driving the Ferraris. And all we're doing all they're doing is driving us crazy.
I heard some optimistic voices when the PPP government took over, saying that, listen, when this oil money comes, and the rising tide will raise all boats. Those optimistic voices who refuse to acknowledge history.
Yeah.
Because we are informed by their previous actions. Exactly. This is the government that would have consistently given a 5%, 2%, 3% increase to public servants over their 23 years. It is the APNU AFC in 2015 that decided we must put an end to this and give people a living wage.
Yeah.
And so if you are naive enough to believe that the PPP have suddenly turned a new leaf and they're going to implement some different economic model, then you're living in a different world. And as the tide is rising, as you said, all these billions of dollars in oil, the tide is rising. But the tide is rising in an inequitable manner. Even this increase tells you that because the people are carrying home more money, carrying home a bigger share of the increase.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something funny. I spoke once to senior Republican officials. This is the type of guys who are not going to be friendly to policies that deal often with equality. But he mentioned to me, that saying, the rising tide floats all boats. It only works if you have a boat.
Right. Right. And the average man can't even afford a canoe.
Can't afford a canoe. You got to get a freezer boat.
Right. So we struggling in the water right now. Literally trying to keep our heads above the water as the tide rises. And we watch the yachts over on the PPP side.
Yeah, well, that's where we're headed. That is where we're headed.
The PPP friends having, listen, it is so figurative and literal at the same time because I saw people on yachts and having boat parties and stuff. And, having dinner at these fancy places and eating $80,000 steak.
I'm telling you,
Right? I saw a big fancy party for the First Lady and a big dinner.
Yeah.
And a couple $1 million.
Well, I do recall there was a charity event with $50,000 a ticket.
Right.
That was
right.
I mean, yes, charity is good. But
charity is good.
Kind of raises an eyebrow. That's quite a hefty.
Right. So those people can afford that. And again, this anti-working class approach.
Absolutely.
Right. It's sad.
Yeah, it is anti-Guyanese because I'll tell you what. There's very few Guyanese who can live that lifestyle. Very few. Vast majority, no matter your ethnicity, no matter whether you're in town or out of town, no matter your region, you are in a tough position and it doesn't look like there's anything coming your way. Nothing coming your way.
I believe that the public servants are going to wake up. I saw a comment, and this is interesting for me. I saw a comment on Facebook by obviously a PPP apologist who said that what the public servants do, they don't produce anything. And I'm thinking, well, the sugar workers haven't produced anything in how many years?
That's a good point.
First of all, they haven't brought any money to the country in how many years? Secondly, that is not a very studied opinion because anybody with any modicum of sense in the head, would understand the importance of the public sector as the engine of any development that is going to happen. The reality is that the PS and the minister can't do the work.
Yeah.
If the public servants decide tomorrow that 8% can't do, and we go in at the ministry and we stand up outside and no work can happen, everything in this country would grind to a halt.
Exactly.
Every single thing. Let the minister and the PS go in and do everything in there. You would see how quickly the government would call people to the table. And so it is for the people to understand how important they are and demand what they should get.
Absolutely.
Because the opposition leader could put out as many press statements as he wants. The parliamentarians can stand up in parliament and shout as loud as they want. If the people continue to sit down and accept it, the PPP will, they are banking on that apathy, they are banking on that docile nature of the Guyanese people.
They are quite happy to give a little bit just enough to calm you down, rather than giving you what it is you're doing. I know that there is some protests, even from the Ministry of Finance, over the question of whether, because there was a collective bargaining where they're supposed to go and meet these unions and come up with a total. And actually what has happened is that they abandoned that scheme altogether, and so there was protest by the unions of that. Now, as it concerns, which is interesting, the Barbados River Bridge, they actually got higher salary increases there, the workers there. And in fact, the workers on the lower end got a larger increase than the high end. But in that situation, you had Barbados River Bridge Corporation, I believe, negotiating with the union.
Yes.
Goodness me. Well, I guess union negotiations are useful sometimes, right? And that's the thing that is sad, is that because we bypass these unions, the government is trying to fight these unions down. We've now got a situation where workers' concerns are not being dealt with at all. It is just someone in a room saying, well, inflation is 8%, get me 8%. Rather than someone who's asking, what are the needs of the public service? What do they require in order for them to carry out their functions? And you mentioned that the person you were talking about said that, but what do the public servants produce? I would humbly submit that teachers produce workers.
The entire country would grind to a halt.
Healthcare workers
That's how
produce healthy people. Policemen produce safety. I mean, it's like, that's a very bizarre thing.
Let that same person who said that, who made that comment, try going to GRA and the workers stand outside and they have to get some, or they got to leave the country. Right? And they got to renew the passport. You see how quick they will say, man, pay the people, let them come back to work.
Exactly.
And you go to the passport offices and everybody stand up outside. Say 8% can't work. And so, there's a saying, the revolution will not be televised. And I firmly believe, and I interpret that in the context of what we are doing here, what the opposition is doing. And there are many TV pundits, there are many Facebook pundits, and we are essentially on television here. But the revolution will not be here. It will not be televised here. It will start when the people realize how important they are.
Absolutely.
And when those public servants decide it is time, that is when you will see the revolution. Because we can talk how much we want. We could talk. When people start looking in the fridge, and I had a friend that said, listen, the time is going to come when people are going to rob you of your bunch of bananas. That's how desperate people are going to get.
Well, those are some of the questions.
Right.
This is as tough a situation as we've seen for the longest time. We've seen inflation, the cost of living crisis, reach 40-year highs across the world, 45 years. It's never been this bad in living memory. I don't even have 45 years to go around to tell you, but that's how bad it is. And so we as a people need to recognize the seriousness of the moment. Folks, how can the budget be 44% bigger and you only get an 8% salary increase? How can that happen? We've got MP Rita Finance who had mentioned actually in 2019 without oil people could have afforded to eat a more decent meal than they can afford in 2022 with oil money. Y'all take that to the bank and bank it. The 8% I pass. I think
8% can't walk.
Can't walk. I think what she's also referring to is the fact that the World Bank had put out a report indicating that 48% of Guyanese are living in poverty.
Yeah.
It's a report from a couple of years ago, but what we believe is going on is that has gotten much worse. Poverty rate has gotten much worse because during the same time period, the cost of living crisis is hit. And so what has happened is that people's spending power has gone right down. Folks, remember what it was like under the coalition when you had none of these concerns. You could go and eat something, everything was all right. Yes, you complain and so on, but you were free to complain because
different times.
We didn't believe in punishing anybody who speaks out of these types of things.
Those are the things that people are asking. Do you remember? And the thing is, it is only 2.5 years ago. Do you remember? Do you remember when your increase made sense? Do you remember when the police force was professional? 2.5 years ago. Do you remember when we had these guardrails of democracy in place?
Yeah.
Do you remember when the oil resource fund, the natural resource fund, had a proposed 22 members?
Yeah.
Drawn from different parts of society, not 5 hand-picked persons by the president.
Lots of controls.
Yes.
To ensure that things don't get out of hand. One of the as you bring that up and as we talk about inflation cost, one of the things that was removed from that natural resources fund, the bill that governs our oil resources, is a committee, an economic committee that was supposed to check to see whether or not the country could absorb the money being spent so that you didn't have inflation.
Yeah, I often say that night will go down in our country's history. Of course, it was marked by the opposition's attempt to stop it, and the grabbing of the mace, which was a very brave act in defense of the Guyanese people, and we must not forget the act that those opposition members had to resort to try and stop the fleecing of the nation. Because essentially what the amendments to the act would have done was gut it of any transparency and oversight and checks and balances. And so it is very instructive and significant that we remember that moment in our history could essentially set us back like 10 years. Because the development now is in the hands of 5 hand-picked people instead of a proper panel that will see the proper spending and implementation of the funds.
So many mechanisms that were vital to the country that, there was a lot of debate around oil and the impact, and a lot of that debate found itself in that law, which tried to address those issues. One of the key questions was, if you spend oil money too quickly, whether you're going to see high inflation. Now we've seen the government increase, the budget usually increases between 10 and 15% every year. But you suddenly get a 4% increase. And that is one of the contributing factors to inflation locally, to the high cost of living locally. Now, of course, we want the government to spend, we want people to get services, we want people to get benefits. But we want the government to be thoughtful in the way that they spend. Viewers, we take this opportunity to remind you that the government spent less than 1% of the national budget on cost of living mitigation. That line item is less than 1% of the national budget. So during the greatest cost of living crisis in 45 years, the government spent less than 1%. The government spent, or at least the line item is $5 billion. That was the line item. Viewers, we take this opportunity to remind you the government made $60 billion more than it expected this year, but only spent a $5 billion line item on cost of living mitigation. So it benefited by $60 billion, but it only spent a $5 billion to help out people.
Where's the rest of the money going?
Where is the money?
And you make a good point there. I think the Guyanese have been hit with the perfect storm of sufferation. Because it's from COVID to 7% increase, inflation, cost of living, high food prices, and now this is not a slap in the face, 8%. It is a perfect storm. perfect storm of sufferation, because
Yeah.
let me say this here. You would think that the administration that is first to spend oil money would see it fit to ensure that its own people are not complaining.
Yeah.
But their mitigation method, as you would have said, is to give out cash grants.
And even one of the things we want to point out, even where they give out the fishing when a horse is out, we just explained that there's 300,000 per household. So where's the other 150?
Yeah, but that that method of mitigation is such an insignificant one and untenable, unsustainable one, because the reality is, if you give me $150,000 today, next 2 months that would have done in groceries.
Yeah, well,
then what am I doing after that?
That's why, viewers, we have advocated a structured approach to cash grants, whether it's salary top-ups, whether it's student stipends, all with the aim, number one, of alleviating poverty, but number two, of helping people to get on the path to be their best selves.
Yeah.
If you want to go and get a degree, if you want to go and be a nurse, if you want to go and be a teacher, if you want to go and just be a member of the public service, further your study, we're going to help you there by giving you a stipend, and you're never going to have to worry, about struggling to make ends meet. Yeah. That's not what we're about. That's not what the people-centered vision is about. So folks, that is what we really want to stress to you, to help you to get a sense that there's an entirely different philosophy. We don't believe in cash grants that is just a scattergun approach or just to satisfy political favorites, but rather a method that is cohesive and that will benefit people across Guyana. That is what we're talking about, because we see it as a way to transform the country rather than just having the country walk around in circles over and over again with no progress. This 8% is a perfect example of making no progress whatsoever rather than moving the country in any kind of direction. Randy, any final thoughts about this travesty that we're seeing here today?
Let's reiterate that 8% can't work.
Can't.
That should be the rallying cry for all public servants, that it can't work. In the most Guyanese of Guyanese way of saying it can't work. And for all of the reasons that we would have expounded on in the last hour, the fact that we have gotten all this money from oil, the fact that we are facing unprecedented pressures from cost of living and inflation, and so that in itself should have told the government that, look, we cannot give these people, cannot keep these people at this level. Across the board, can't work. And so it is incumbent on the people at this point in time, I will say this, to make their voices heard, right? You know that the APNU AFC would have taken your interest in heart when they were in power, and they would have given you those increases, and we continue to fight for you even out of power. And so you have a choice. You have a choice when elections comes, whenever it comes. You have a choice now to make your voices heard. And I say this again, that the revolution will not be televised. It will start with you. And I just want to leave that with our friends and family who are watching. It will start with you, all the public servants.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that, Randy. As we young people say, the pressure is getting worse.
It's gotten.
That is what, unfortunately, we're facing in the country. Viewers, we want to thank you for tuning in. We want to tell you, keep the struggle going and try and make, in whatever way you can, the government understand that this is not acceptable and that these excess revenues need to be put towards making life easier for Guyanese. On that note, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you again on The Lowdown.